I got one more as a sort of warning, to be honest. If the ocean waters begin to move, yes, and they begin to cover parts of land that were once walkable, say here, Britain,
Yeah.
let's say America, let's say Australia, let's say, you know, when the waters begin to move, yes, and Antarctica becomes a baking oasis of an equator, let's say, and the rest of the land masses become the poles, let's say, you need to dig your coal up. Any types of fuel you have underground, you need to find ways to get it up. And in an emergency, if this does happen, let's not leave it under the ground, under the ocean somewhere where we can't get to it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
If that water moves and it covers Britain, let's say, and it starts doing it within, I don't know, scientists said Andromeda would take this many hundreds of billions of years to reach us and start merging with our galaxies, yes?
Yeah.
It was a good guess, right? But it turns out to be not so true, yes?
Yeah.
And then it seems to be already starting, the influences seem to be starting. I well believe that the stars will align in such a beautiful way that it doesn't cause the biggest smash up that you've ever seen. I think it's quite a uniform dance, to be honest. It's quite intricate. It's very beautiful to be witness to. Either or. The thing is that when we start to have waters move and more lands become exposed elsewhere, this has been throughout our whole entire history. If we do not dig up the coal, if we do not find a way to bring the fuel up, if we don't find a way to do this, and we don't have nuclear power stations that can be unhitched at a moment's notice, lifted, put on a ship somewhere, and moved to somewhere where the land starts to become more exposed, it will kill many people across the entirety of the earth, based on fuel poverty. If we don't make salt water available into fresh drinking water, we will die of thirst very quickly, because there won't be enough land to formulate rivers. Rivers then begin to spill over into salt water. If you overlook any of these events as, I'll be all right, it will not. It definitely will not. We need to find ways to prepare for that, just in case it happens. This should be a national security risk, big one, a very big one, that if not looked at in the correct way, if not planned for if we don't plan for worst case scenario, number one, we take things very much for granted, is water. If salt water begins to fill up on the land, it will mix with the river waters, causing a saline-y, and then it will go across the skim, let's say. We'll make a skim of fresh water, but you still, with the waves churning, this causes mixing. It will mix back into it and become just as salty as the ocean itself. Therefore, plans need to be put in place. Number one is drinking water. One of the reasons for the sun chasers, is to be able to extract water, fresh drinking water, from ocean water. These things float on the ocean anyway, so if there was a massive event that were to happen, it wouldn't matter, because these things already float. Floating solar panels, there again, that's floating power. You also need to be able to do it with nuclear power. If it goes underground, indeed, it does go underground, or anywhere else for that matter, and the oceans begin to move, at least we won't lose drinking water. If there's coal, it's easy to get it now. Where do we put it? On the moon. Who cares? In space. Where do we put this coal? Up on the land somewhere. Somewhere where if there was a load of water coming, it'd float. We can get it at a later date. If the seas don't get too rageous and very much crazy, all of this stuff should wash up to the area that we move to. Are we going to be the nations that fall because of this? Are we going to go extinct because of this? Or are we going to take many steps ahead in order to ensure that we don't go extinct and that our numbers stay very much high, not fall downwards? Remember, there's many ways to kill the dinosaurs, many ways. One is starvation. Two is the lack of warmth. Again, there was massive climate events. What happens if the few ancestors that we did have around the time, maybe there were more, but it all moved and there was nothing to burn? There was nothing to keep warm with. Because all of the once trees that grew somewhere else, all that coal was over there. Now it's underwater. How are we going to get it? We need to think ahead of these events, not because it will happen, but just in case it does happen, because it's already happened once, twice, 3 times before. And we need to look at that and think, right, what can we do with that? Can we move this over here? Do we know somewhere where there's going to be land mass? Could it be at the poles? It might be, it might not be. They say that there are rich wonders beyond the South Pole. But if this indeed does go underwater too, that's a hell of a risk to leave that. And I know it seems like it's a hell of a lot to go and dig up all of this stuff, but wouldn't you rather be prepared? I mean, if nuclear power stations could move, then there's enough warmth, but then technology. Old technology, what if it went onto the moon? What if it went around Earth's orbit? Again, shielding out some of this sunlight. Maybe, maybe not. Possibly, possibly not. But it's there for a later date that we can bring it back down. It's a good job we did do that then, weren't it? And then the numbers begin to not fall down. Transformers, electricity, different stuff like this. We're going to need power cables. Anything that builds a society now, we're going to need it in the massive amounts. Stuff that floats, stuff that's water resistant. We're going to need to be able to extract fresh water from salt water. Because in the first beginning of this, how fast it ever takes to get going, maybe it's bit by bit, and then all of a sudden. If it does, there's no fresh water. It will take time to rain. And if it does fall in the formulates of snow, is it frosty? Is it going to, not frosty, sorry, salty. Is it salty? Is this all falling as salt in the beginning? Or is it falling as fresh? Again, a lot of stuff that plays into the mix. We notice that immunity gets higher, and we notice that immunity gets lower. Is it the fact that the bacteria has already been here, and always been here, but there was more oxygen that we were breathing? We didn't need to breathe so much. Then, as the carbon starts to increase, so does the bacteria. Yet the bacteria was already there, but our ability to absorb this carbon now started to increase. Therefore, given the bacteria that was already present now a foothold within your body in order for it to begin growing. Do you get what I mean? So perhaps it's not that the bacteria has all of a sudden started rising up everywhere. No, it's probably already here, but the levels of carbon have now increased. And therefore, with that carbon based in you, there is more of a foothold for the bacteria to take hold within inside of you. Therefore, it is able to live inside of you because of the lack of oxygen. More oxygen would kill it. It won't have a chance to get a foothold within your body. Now that the carbon begins to increase and the oxygen begins to deplete, enough to sustain life, but enough to sustain more life than once before, more life forms begin to trigger off inside of us. I don't know that one fully, but again, isn't it a possibility? These things need thinking about. Without the thought there and without the preparedness of it, we're sitting ducks. So yes, to the national security advisories, wherever it may be around the world, this stuff needs extracting in some way and needs to be able to be put somewhere for safekeep in a way that it can be got later. Because damn, if that water hits underneath the UK and we've got a coal mine down there, how are we going to get it? Under all of that pressure, what if it's lost to the oceans? What if indeed there is some sort of oxygen event that happens? Then there's too much oxygen all of a sudden. Because the bacteria that thrives in carbon begins to grow and multiply when the oxygen carbon levels begin to increase and the oxygen levels deplete. And it goes to a certain point, and then this type of bacteria then starts multiplying. It's already here. It's just that it's unable to do so in a rich oxygen environment, so it keeps small, in small numbers. But then when the carbon scale tips and the oxygen scale depletes and the carbon increases, this bacteria then is making heaven for them. They explode in the biggest numbers ever, then they die, drop and break, and then release their oxygen that they've taken from the carbon. Then this overproduction of the oxygen then kills this bacteria and keeps it down at the small numbers again. And then the process happens again, back one, back two, back one, back two. So in the beginning, okay for big life forms, if you want to call us big life forms. And then all of a sudden we overbreathe, we overproduce, we overdo this, we overburn, whether it is all of those things or not. natural events. This then explodes to the point where big life forms then begin to struggle. But the small life forms begin to get a foot. Ooh, good environment for me to rise again. They then rise up, drop the bigger life forms, so that the smaller ones now live in abundance for a time. These ones then die, and then the big life forms then rise back again. It's like a wave, back and forth from small life forms to big life forms to small life forms, being the microbes and different stuff like that. Viruses, bacteria, and this is where you get the evolutional changes. Those changes take place. And it's one fluctuates in a pyramid this side, and then that peak, if it starts to dwindle off, then these ones start to rise up. Those ones are nearly non-existent. So we still had bacteria, but in small numbers. But we got larger, more bigger animals, let's say. But in the small pocket, you still got the small bacterium. It seems like we live side by side. And then it switches. Now the big bacteria and the small life form, bigger life forms now are in the small numbers. And back and forth and back and forth. And this comes from a fluctuation of gases. Then in between the peaks, between the two of the pyramids, let's say, before you have one rise up again, that is the evolutional changes in the middle there. Back and forth in these cycles. You know, this whole God particle and different things like that, meh. I don't believe any of that is the starting of the universe at all. Nah, I think it's a waste of money. I don't think that's how it started. I mean, it's close. We need more energy, more this, more this. When are you going to say that an experiment like that has failed? Rather than more and more and more and more. I don't know. When do you say that you're going to call it quits? We can still make weird and wonderful stuff that might not be here now. But, you know, you'll find that very strange that these particles wouldn't still be in existence. Well, it's because they smell blah, blah, blah. Okay. I don't know. I don't know where I sit with that one. But, nah. So, I just wonder, are we seeing all of this for what it really is? For how it really could be? This will be a very interesting thing. And as it pans out, again, how do you get a lid on that? Well, I guess then, if we were reptilian, we would have learned to breathe a lot more. Would have breathed faster. Anything that can't breathe faster and cope with that cold-bloodedness, because you get very cold when you breathe fast. When you breathe really fast, you cool down. That's why you pant after you've been running and you're really hot and you get so hot that you do not, and you're so rich in carbon that you do not want any of those trillions and trillions of bacteria and microbes and different things that live within you to explode in that moment. So you breathe in more, this cools you down. As you begin to cool down, you then are a bit more reptilian, are you not? Cold-blooded. The hands turn blue. The lips begin to go blue. You can deal with that within a certain degree. Big dinosaurs that are already cold, then get colder, that's extinction. That's game over. So, I don't know. More comes as I play around with this sort of thought processes. Anyway, that's where I'm at.